Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Halpin. Welcome to another Cradle conversation. I am recording from my home in Walnut Creek, California, which is on the stolen land of the Bay Miwok. I use she, her pronouns, and I am delighted to have my guest, Lindsay Pera, join us for this Cradle conversation. So hello, Lindsay.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm truly grateful and honored to be here.
Same. I'm so excited. I wanted just to tell those who are listening a little bit about you. I have known of Lindsay for a few years through Elizabeth Cronies McLaughlin was how I discovered you. But we're connected by my neighbor who lives over that way, a cousin, a cousin of Lindsay, my friend Samantha Francois. And Lindsay, when I think about who she is someone who walks a mystical path with practical feet. And so she is the founder of the Mystic Society and the Modern Mystic Institute. She has a background in business that she is bringing into the world of mysticism to help a lot of business owners be grounded, again, like the practical and the mystical combined in a way that I've never seen it before, and in a way that I find continually inspiring and grounding and really expansive. And so, Lindsay, I just wanted to welcome you here into my space, an opportunity to just be together and to weave a little bit a concept that I'm learning from you.
I'm really grateful not only to be here, but for the work that you are doing in the world and the containers and the spaces that you've created for these important conversations. So thank you.
Yeah. So as I always do before we get started, or when I remember, I just like to call everybody close across space and time into the space to feel the cradle that comes from connecting, that comes from authentic conversations and community, and to join us in cultivating something new, cultivating more expansive ways of moving through really uncertain times. And so come close. And thank you for joining us. One of the things that I hope that you're comfortable with me sharing is a little bit about your health journey.
Yeah.
Actually, how about, would you be willing to say, because I think that your experience moving through these times is really important as someone who has been living with chronic illness and cultivating chronic wellness. So
yeah, it's funny how not funny, it's very real in my world how these threads have woven together. So I'll bring them all forward now so everyone knows what you're referring to. So I, as you mentioned, have my origins all the way back in management consulting and software and business in Silicon Valley. But while I was growing that career, I started to develop health challenges. And ultimately that led me on a multi-year journey. And eventually after the birth of my third child, into a diagnosis at long last of chronic Lyme disease, and learning that I not only had been kind of managing myself, the symptoms and the experience of having cumulative chronic illness, Lyme disease, the viral, high viral loads that come with that, the suppressed immune system, all of that myself for over a decade, but I had passed it to my 3 children, and that each were experiencing symptoms in their own way, all of us undiagnosed. And it really wasn't until my third child, my daughter Ember, was born. She was the most severely impacted. She had severe neurological issues at birth that led us to go expert to expert in the state of California to get to the bottom of what was going on for her and to help her claim life to survive. We were very much, it was very touch and go after she was born. And the blessing that unfolded from that space was finally a practitioner, a doctor in the Bay Area in California, who kind of looked at all of us as a holistic unit for the first time and said, okay, wait a minute, this one's experiencing this one's experiencing that, you're experiencing this thing, and the newborn is experiencing this. Let's figure out what's going on in the whole family. And initially they were thinking maybe it's a lead toxicity, there's something in the home, you know, but that we did run an infectious disease panel, and that led to that diagnosis, which then led to a multi-year journey in trying to recover from undiagnosed Lyme. And as anyone who's journeyed with an undiagnosed anything, often the onset of treatment is worse than what you were managing before you started treatment, because it can create a tremendous burden on the body to begin to create die-off and to try to restore the body back to health. So we have been on a chronic illness journey. One of my first entrepreneurial endeavors was actually supporting people in the chronic illness community, specifically with Lyme. My first software company that I started was creating a tracker for people navigating chronic illness. We called it a journey of chronic wellness, because so much of what you experience when you're navigating chronic illness has to do with your own mindset, but also what gets projected on you from others. And even a diagnosis in and of itself is a label that can be a burden regardless of the symptoms that it carries with it. So by flipping the branding of that tracker in our business to this concept of chronic wellness, we were seeking to flip the experience of navigating illness, to identify the silver linings, the medicine that can come from a deep journey into the body, into the self, into recovery. And so my entrepreneurial world really was born from the fertile ground of navigating chronic illness. What was interesting is my passion for tracking and for wellness and for optimal living kind of grew out of that. And yet I always brought to my work endeavors this bridge walking, so to speak, is what we call it in Mystic Land, between practical business and spiritual, intuitive guidance. And so I think having come out the other side of chronic illness, I had no desire in the world left to keep those things compartmentalized, and could only show up authentically with an integration of those two sides of self. So that bridge walking blossomed into creating and running businesses in a very new paradigm way, one that looks beyond simply profit and the bottom line and looks to the people that are engaged, the planet, and how we operate the business. And so this concept of new paradigm business became one that I was invited to speak on and to consult with other businesses. I really enjoyed bringing that intersection of thinking between the intuitive knowing and the strategic business acumen to socially conscious businesses, educational nonprofits, world changers, healers, anyone who was actually looking to disrupt the status quo in whatever industry, whether that was 9 to 5 or corporate or their own business or their healing practice, anyone who was willing to disrupt the status quo and say, no, we won't do it that way anymore. The way that depletes, causes stress, puts our planet or our people in compromising positions or detrimental or deadly, and who were seeking solutions. And so my work creating the Mystic Society to create a safe place for those who wanted to do things in new ways and wanted to seek new pathways forward, my work in doing that is all about creating a safe place to link arms. And so for, the last, I think, we're going on 7 or 8 years now, my work within the Mystics has been about consulting, running a boutique consultancy, creating products and offerings to support people in walking that new paradigm path, whether that was their own internal journey or their business and livelihood. And we call that right livelihood. It's a Buddhist concept that essentially, although it's mirrored in almost every indigenous culture, but I believe it actually is connected to our original instructions as humans. And that concept of right livelihood is essentially that there's a reason that you're on the planet and that there's something you're meant to do. And the more you align yourself to that, the more you receive back in return from the universe. So in the Mystics, we talk about right livelihood being the intersection of your soul purpose and path, of sacred commerce, and of the legacy and leadership that you bring forward. But ultimately, it's about living every day from a place where you know that you're showing up in integrity, in an authentic self that's true to what is really authentic and real for you, without masks, without other people's labels of what success looks like or the way it has to be done. And by creating those permissions, we create the opportunity for real alignment. So that finds us in this conversation in this day where now we are living in a time of collective shift and transformation. This pandemic has brought forward the intersection of livelihood, of health, of our connections to other. In the Mystics, we talk about kind of the 3 transformational levers. These are the things that affect change in our lives as individuals, or within a family unit, or within an organization. And there are health and well-being. That's the first one. The second one is our heart and our relationships. And the third is our finances, our experience of abundance or prosperity. And this pandemic, you can very clearly see, it quickly impacted all 3 of those. It leads off looking like it's going to have large health impacts, which of course it is. We're experiencing many, many millions impacted and many, many lives lost. But we're also seeing the impact on those social connections and relationships, whether that's the strain it puts on households being in close quarters together, whether that's being disconnected from people and unable to be together, whether you look at the way in which we're seeing disconnects between countries, between states, like this relationship pieces are being stretched and strained and being forced to reform themselves. And then also, of course, you can't dismiss the huge economic impact that this is having. By keeping people out of their livelihood, by impacting people's ability to work safely, all of those things. So again, here we are kind of at this choice point of humanity. And then interestingly enough, my family found themselves kind of in the front wave of also experiencing COVID. My husband is a firefighter, and so he's a frontline worker. And also I had a college-age student who was coming back from college at the time when the shelter in place was being called forward. We do not at this time know which of the 2 of them it came from, but it's actually looking like it was probably my son. But within just a few days of kind of being called back to the home, my son came down with a fever and the kind of telltale symptoms, and then just very quickly moved through the household, myself, then my middle daughter, and then my youngest daughter. So all of the skills and resiliency that we built, having been a family that navigated chronic wellness, certainly were called upon and have been of service in these times. But it also is our Achilles heel. This is the place where we had an entry point on the side of our health. And so we are very much in the not knowing as we navigate the experience of, we have been labeled presumptive positive because of how early we showed symptoms and where things were with testing. We were not able to get tested until almost 30 days after onset of symptoms, at which point the tests only have a certain rate of accuracy based on viral loads. But by the time you get 14 days past onset of symptoms, the false negatives drop, and then it increases for both. Its inability to accurately predict for both false negatives and positives gets more and more jeopardized the farther you get from the onset of symptoms. So we're in that boat of waiting for antibody testing to really be able to track and understand what it is that we're dealing with. But we also are in the unfortunate situation that 2 of the 6 of us who are impacted are still experiencing symptoms at day 58. And it also has brought us out of remission from our experience with Lyme disease. And so we are now categorized as relapsed on that front as well. So we're considered by the doctors to be dealing with some type of post-viral syndrome that comes from being presumptive positive with COVID, while also having our past bacterial presences in the body from Borrelia and Babesia also mounting. So we're treating from both sides. So it's been a very real journey. I feel like it's one of those kind of can't make this up kind of situations, both from the shadow side, just wanting to look up to the universe and say, are you kidding me? Am I really here again? I was very much on the kind of I won't say I was on the first wave of Lyme disease, but certainly we were still pre-CDC acceptance. We were pre-testing. We had to fight very hard to get treatment and to get any kind of understanding of what we were going through. And now we're very much in the same place with COVID and experiencing that as well. So yeah, you weren't kidding when you say that it's quite an intersection of influences.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I noticed is how quickly your family was able to mobilize, you know, to come up with your own protocol, knowing that it wasn't going to be available anytime soon coming from a medical doctor. And so really kind of drawing back on your own experience and sharing that out responsibly was really powerful to see.
Thank you. We did mobilize quickly. I think both, my husband is a firefighter, but he's also a medic and a holistic health practitioner. And he and I both, I think you get trained to do this as a family with chronic illness, but we had our eye on this early. And so we were so blessed to be able to call on our practitioners, whether they were traditional MDs or whether that was Chinese medicine practitioners that we work with, or naturopaths, or the specialists who have walked with us with Lyme disease, all of whom are pretty accustomed to talking about the nuances of viral exposures. And so we did compile what ended up being a very effective protocol for both preventative care coming into it, and then what to do at onset of symptoms, and then how to navigate through symptoms. And now we have a definite section to add about this kind of post-viral component, what's working there. But I'm happy to share the link to that document with your audience. We just put it out as a free resource. It's just a Google Doc, and I'm amazed to see how much traffic continues to move through that document as families are beginning to realize they're going to have to empower themselves to take their own healing into their own hands. I'm just looking out at everyone who might be listening to this interview. Please do not try to tackle this thing with over-the-counter cough medicine and Tylenol alone. I feel like, especially in America, we put so much faith in the doctor to tell you what to do and how to treat. But when you are in a space where they don't know, you have to empower yourselves. You have got to kind of bring your own apothecary and your own resources around you. So yeah, anything we could do to help people claim that empowerment for themselves and stand a chance of battling this in a good way and hopefully recovering easily. We certainly had those in the house who were able to do that and clear it easily. But certainly if there's any type of underlying immune stress or chronic illness or underlying condition, please be prepared ahead of time and don't just wait to let it happen.
And I would say that for those people who are watching who have lived with chronic illness, they're going to recognize that need to be scrappy and to trust the punches and their they've known, whereas somebody who hasn't had to navigate chronic illness may be thinking about their own treatment much more simply and much more kind of doctor reliant. And I'm not, of course, neither one of us are undermining the skills or the education of our medical practitioners.
But you touched on it with the word mobilization. I mean, whether it's to work within the system of your MD and your primary practitioner, or whether you find yourself in a situation like we are, where you're kind of piecing or cobbling together your resources, your choice of words with mobilizing is so beautiful, because essentially it's be prepared to be able to move. So have the doctor on speed dial, know who you will go to, maybe order the basic preventatives so you have them in your home. And these preventatives are not big, scary things. High dose vitamin C is incredibly effective. And it's an example of something you don't want to wait for onset of symptoms to have them in your pantry or in your bathroom right now. So it's really, the word mobilization is perfect. Just take the first steps to mobilize before you even have to. And then you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that you never needed it, or you had it when you need it. And that's all we really want.
Yeah, thank you so much. Whew.
Yeah, I know, it's a lot.
So with all of that, and that's why, I felt like we needed to tap into the complexity of your journey, because then the first question is, to me, is your answer is so much more profound, which is the question is, what cradles you? Huge. throughout all of this, what cradles you?
I love the question. And I just also want to reflect gratitude to you for even your claiming of the imagery and the metaphor of the cradle. And part of what I love about it is you instantly recognize that it's a container for something. And a lot of my work has to do with helping people understand the containers in their lives, and the importance of understanding containers in order to affect change. So the imagery of the cradle is just this quintessential container for what? For innocence, for the vulnerable, for the child, for the baby, for the thing that wants to be nurtured. And so that is so profound. But also there's some shadow and light of the cradle. The baby placed in the cradle is not at the mother's breast, is not, up against the resources of the other. The child placed in the cradle begins to need to experience its own knowing of self, its own safety from within, to begin to identify what comfort and nurturing looks like with no external influence, just with themselves in the container. And so I just think you had such a brilliant gift to humanity with the naming of this series, and also with the question, leading off with that question. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Reflection. Yeah.
It's so important. So for me, the cradle first came in the willingness to set down the idea that anybody else was going to rush in and save me, the idea that any doctor would have the answer, the idea that it was going to somehow be a certain way. I was, even after I left the corporate world to move down to the country in this multi-generational eco homestead, to live off the grid and be wholly holistic. We built a straw bale house. We have, entirely, every choice was made with health and wellness in mind. And yet that didn't solve the problem either, right? The moving away, the changing careers, the living close to the land, all of those were wonderful steps in the direction of our healing, but it didn't end up being the solution. There was still this kind of recovering type A in me that felt like if I just worked a little harder, or researched a little bit more, or made one more right connection, or paid for one more specialist, there was still that part of me that felt like it was all on me to solve or to figure out. And it ultimately came to a head for me. We were being called up to Stanford to bring our infant up, who was still not transferring milk. She'd been diagnosed failure to thrive. We honestly didn't know if she was going to stay in her body or whether she was going to leave. And I was very ill as a result of, pregnancy while sick, and now dealing with an infant who was not thriving or even surviving. It was a disaster in our world, a complete crumbling of all of the security and safety that we thought we had amassed through the choices that we had made. And so we were in the car as a family going up to Stanford to see a specialist, and, yet feeling, for me as the mom, this feeling of, here I am putting all my belief in the next person, the next miracle to come, the next thing to solve it. And so I was straddling this line in that moment between perpetuating the insanity of the belief that something was going to save me or rescue, while also recognizing I no longer had the energy or the resources to believe that narrative anymore. And at that exact moment, the sun was going down over the Santa Cruz Mountains off on the left-hand side. We were heading north, and it was just the most spectacular, glorious, grace-filled, luminous moment. And the car was quiet, the children were resting, and I felt just this exhale in my body that, like, okay, so if nothing changes, and if I can't change the trajectory for my newborn, if I can't change the trajectory for my other two children, for myself, if this was all we ever had in this lifetime, in this moment, this would be okay. This would be enough. And I just felt this wash of gratitude that moved through my body for that moment, where I needed nothing in that moment to change. I could fully accept and love exactly what was happening. I mean, I think about Loving What Is and Byron Katie, and like how much I wanted to throw that book to the wall when I first read it. So I'm like, how could anybody possibly love this? How could anybody surrender? In that moment, I finally understood intellectually, but also metaphysically, what she means in that type of surrender. And I took a snapshot on my little flip phone at the time of that sunset, blurry, crazy through the windshield photo. But I made a public declaration. I also wasn't very active on social media at that point, but I was called immediately to put it out on Facebook. I didn't even have a profile picture at that point. And I just labeled it without even thinking, 365 days of gratitude, day one. And it just was it was a gesture to myself. And I think I wanted witness more than anything, like accountability, that if I could somehow capture a moment of gratitude each day, then there would be enoughness in that to be a meaningful life, regardless of whether we ever found healing, regardless of whether my daughter survived or not, regardless of all those external things that I was learning I could not control. What I could control is the lens through which I received meaning, and gratitude became that lens.
Wow.
So that became my cradle, is a gratitude practice that started, I'm in my 10th year now.
Wow.
And I've been consistent in that, and it's grown into so many things.
Yeah. Amazing. It's amazing that surrender to enoughness, I guess.
Yeah.
That surrender to what is. And it reminds me of the passing of my best friend, Julie, to breast cancer years ago. And she was an amazing storyteller, as you are. Mm-hmm. And she always wanted to tell her own story her own way, which is the gift that I learned. I'm still learning from her. But when she knew that she was dying, she was really kind of struggling to find, like, how am I going to hold this? What story am I going to tell? And what came to her was that in this moment she could say yes. And so she shifted from fighting to living her dying. And it was just, I could cry. It's just really like, it's become one of my life mantras, is just saying yes. And it wasn't about giving up. It was just to kind of fully open to, like, I can't spend any more time in resistance to what is,
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. The amount of energy, the amount of suffering, and the unbelievable release out the other side. And for something that anybody can claim in any moment, regardless of where they are or the resources around them or any label placed on them by anyone ever throughout history, this is inner work that is hugely transformational. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. I can relate on so many levels.
Oh, okay. That gratitude practice. It's funny, the 365 of it is daunting to me. Like,
Yep.
So, okay. So thank you. A gratitude practice to cradle you.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter what. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that gratitude has gotten a little bit of a bad rap over the last 5 years because it became commercially viable. Many books were written about it, and Oprah started talking about it. And that's not to dismiss the importance of it and the value, but it actually became something that started to get lost in the noise, and that people became desensitized to the importance of it. And so I really think it's important to come back to understanding the significance of gratitude, not as something you think about, and this is very much linked to your work and the somatic work. Gratitude practice is not about thinking about what you're grateful for. I know a lot of people would say, like, oh, make a gratitude list, think about all the things you're grateful for, and that can be very powerful and helpful. But the real magic comes from the somatic experience of gratitude. If you can connect yourself to a moment where you actually are feeling grateful, when you're holding a hot mug in your hands, there's something primal. It's like life-giving to go like, oh, there's something warm in my hands. Or maybe it's just the morning sunlight coming in through the window. Or maybe it's standing under a hot shower, like hot water coming out of a wall. Like, think of how many like generations of human beings never had that experience. What a tremendous thing that is. The more we can find those moments where we actually experience gratitude in our bodies, that's where it really gets magical and transformative. So my work in sharing gratitude as kind of a foundational practice, whether that's in life transformation or right livelihood in our business experiences, is to help people shift from this idea that it's a cognitive practice alone, and instead understand that, you know, as our elders teach us, the indigenous teachers tell us, gratitude are the words spoken before all else. They are the foundation for everything we do in this life's experience as humans walking in these bodies, that it is a spiritual and physical and emotional and metaphysical practice. And that one single gesture, whether it's posting on Facebook or having a journal prompt or pausing your family before you begin a meal to give thanks, like whatever it is that you choose, if you come at it from that place, you experience that butterfly effect that ripples through all those aspects of self, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the metaphysical, and you begin to attract so much more to be grateful for.
And I think, you know, just as you kind of added on the caveat of, you know, the capitalistic piece of like the gratitude journal or whatever, I also feel like there's kind of a gaslighty version of gratitude where, you know, you may be suffering, but my offering to you is, well, you have so much to be grateful for, you know, so like that imposition of gratitude is not what we're talking about.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it could be similar to the type of spiritual bypassing we see in lots of different ways. Also, like the dismissing of realism in these times by calling it fear-based. Like there's all kinds of interesting things that we're seeing percolate right now in terms of human mindset shifts. But gratitude, gaslighting is real. But I like to encourage people to remember that there is no hierarchy of grief, and that your grief is not better or worse than my grief, or my trauma is not better or worse than your trauma. And yes, we all have work to do to peel apart layers of privilege, of understanding all the many things we have to be grateful for. But at its origin, cultivating the systems and the awareness around gratitude delivers everybody to an improved state. And that's what we're working on in the collective, is everybody becoming more aware, becoming more present, becoming more empathetic, more compassionate. And gratitude is a threshold for us to walk through regardless of where we are in our life. And it shouldn't be dismissed as simply a kind of trite practice.
No, thank you. So the next question is, do you have a cradle to offer us?
Oh, goodness. I love that. I hadn't thought of my creations as being cradles, but as I've sat with and reflected on this thing you've created, I realize how the containers that I have created in my life and in my business do seek to act like a cradle. They seek to be safe places. They seek to be places for nurturing and healing and growth. And so I would say the primary cradle that I've created is a community of world changers, of healers, of seekers, of deep thinkers, of bridge walkers called the Mystic Society. And it is a community. It also is a portal with trainings and courses. We also have group community coaching calls twice a month. It is a life's work for me and a passion place. I think if all else were to fall away in this world, in the same way I felt like if all else falls away, I'll have gratitude in my existence of right livelihood. If all else were to fall away, I would still always have the Mystic Society. It's just that powerful and that transformative and that magical. So that is one of the cradles that I've experienced, or that I've created and can share with this community. But I also have a practice and a framework that is free that I was hoping to share with your community as well. And that has to do with an acronym, the Gratitude Secret. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'd love to share that with your community as well.
So it's more about just kind of maybe fleshes out a gratitude practice, or could you?
Yeah. So the Gratitude Secret is an acronym. I think one of the things that was triggering for me over this last 10 years, watching gratitude journals and gratitude affirmations and all these things become so mainstream and commercialized, is that I felt like it lost the true medicine in gratitude, which is its unbelievable power to create positive shift, to create room for transformation, for healing. And so what we sought in bringing this framework forward is to offer resources to help people reclaim that through a gratitude practice. So SECRET is an acronym, and the S stands for, first and foremost, shift. The way that if you can think about gratitude as being a source of shift in your life, and think about what kind of shift you're calling in, whether that's a healing shift, a heart shift, a relationship shift, or shift in your finances, your intention of it is the first step to receiving it. The E in SECRET is for that experiential component. It gives us the opportunity to talk about the difference between thinking gratitude, but instead experiencing it in our body and becoming attuned to recognizing when we're having experiences of gratitude. I mean, so key, and helping not only us, but helping our kids learn that, have that literacy early on, and our coworkers. And, this is something I delight in the workspace as well, because it's low-hanging fruit, helping people recognize what their bodies do when they're feeling grateful. It's just magical. The C in SECRET stands for connection to you, where just because I'm an acronym freak, you also is an acronym that stands for yourself, others, and the universe. So we take it a little deeper and realize that connection to you enables you to get this full wheel experience of deeper connection, because ultimately true meaning, or the feeling of being realized, or the feeling of being successful or healed or loved, tends to come from our understanding and claiming of connection to ourselves and to others and to our higher self. The R in SECRET stands for resonance. That has everything to do with the energetic practice of what does and doesn't work for us, with your story about your friend. And the saying yes becomes a practice of discernment, right? That's like understanding what resonates as truth, as a yes for you. Saying yes is as important as the things we say no to. So understanding that resonance is key to the gratitude practice. The second E in SECRET stands for every day. And this tends to be the question I get asked most often, like, all right, Lindsay, I'm going to, willing suspension of disbelief. I'll go ahead and say gratitude's important, but how often do I have to do it? And I would say every day. Why not? Every day that you're given is a gift. Why not at least find one way to gesture gratitude in this day? It can be as simple as just closing your eyes when you first wake up and say, I'm thankful for this day. That's it. There you go. Gratitude practice. Or it could be your yoga practice, or it could be your meditation, or it could be your journal, or it could be, I live and walk an entire prism of gratitude each day at this point without feeling burdened by it in any way whatsoever. But the everyday component is a good starting point for a rhythm. And then the last...
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second.
Please.
Of course, I was like, yeah, gratitude, but like 365.
Right. What?
Okay.
I don't want to commit to that, but we can always find some way to commit to a piece that doesn't feel burdensome. And that's where we want to start. Really, my first gratitude practice before my gesture to putting it out on social media was simply, I made a commitment to thank the powers that be every time I got to open my eyes each morning, because I was getting given a gift that many around the world weren't going to get that day. And so that, to this day, is my first gratitude practice of the day. It is a split second. It happens the moment I realize I'm coming out of the ethers and into form. The minute I start to feel my body, before I start the scan of how do I feel? How did I sleep? What does the day hold? Before any of that enters my consciousness, I just go, oh, wow, I get another one. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that's where my gratitude starts for the day. So yeah, that everyday piece definitely sounds daunting, but I promise you there's a way you can find a version of it that fits to you without feeling like a burden.
Well, even the way that you frame this, like it's the least.
Yeah. Right.
I can do.
Right.
I get a miracle of just being here. Like, thanks.
Every day. But exactly. Thanks. Yes, exactly. And then the T at the end of secret stands for transformation. And shift and transformation are closely linked, but they're not the exact same thing. So you see how this begins to be a self-repeating wheel. But ultimately, transformation is what comes out the other side. It's the butterfly emerging from the cocoon. It's what happens from the entelechy in the cells. Entelechy in cells is knowing what something is meant to become. And claiming shift is what puts you on track and in motion for transformation. Recognizing and celebrating that transformation along the way is the next step. So it's an acronym. It's super easy. It's basically just a mindset hack for how to help begin to make gratitude work for you in good ways. Because gratitude is a transformational tool. It is a healing agent in the body. It is an emotional and trauma recovery tool. It's also a manifestation tool. It's a big answer to the question of what is law of attraction? What is manifestation? And so this little PDF we'll share with you is just kind of first step into getting into that. And and I'm honored and grateful that you'll be sharing it with your audience.
Yes, I am so excited. And I really just want to highlight what you said was that you were worried about the magic leaving gratitude. And so this is your way of like infusing a gratitude practice with that medicine and magic. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a perfect summary of that intention. That's beautifully said. Thank you.
So the third question might have been answered already, but the third question is, do you have something that we can practice?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a gratitude practice. What I find in working with people and creating their gratitude practice is that they tend to already have one somewhere in that YOU, whether it's the you or the others or the universe. Dixie's going to chime in. But the idea of coming to the practice is if you're already strong on the internal practice, the you piece, then maybe test yourself at one of the others. Like, what could it be to have a public gratitude practice? For me, that was part of putting it out on social media, putting it out to Facebook. Was like, I have this internal practice, but here I am still struggling, still really seeking this external thing to come rescue me. What would it be to be witnessed in my attempt at having gratitude? And so for me, that visibility piece was taking it the next step. For you, maybe you're really strong on the spiritual side. It's a part of your meditation or your yoga, but you haven't necessarily brought it outward. So every person tends to be different in their way. In all honesty, I find very few people who don't have some version of gratitude, whether that's grace at dinner or, who knows what it might be. But claiming it, naming it a thing, and being present to it each day is the practice. And that's where you start.
Yeah, love that. And I also love that you talked about like going public with a practice is not about performance. It's about being witnessed.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh,
I love that. That's the importance of being seen,
Yep. So many people have messaged me or emailed me or called me inspired by Gratitude Girl and 365 Days of Gratitude and asking if they can do the same thing. And my answer back to them is always, well, of course, like this is something I hope everybody could do in their way. But the feedback that follows that is exactly what you just said, which is please do it for you. If it becomes an act of trying to please others, it is actually losing the medicine and the magic. If what you are instead doing is allowing yourself to be witnessed in an authentic moment of gratitude, then I think it's in keeping with the intention behind it. So, yeah.
Thank you. So the last question is, do you have a vision or a blessing for the collective?
Oh gosh, I love that. It's a great question. I think what I'm feeling called to say right now is different than what I would have thought coming into having seen that question in writing. It actually is a blessing of permission granting. Something about hearing you say the word enoughness reflected back to me just created an exhale in my body. And so if we could just claim that knowing of enoughness and grant anyone and everyone permission to be whole and intact and full from that place of enoughness, then anything that you do with gratitude will just be an amplification of that. So that would be my prayer, my vision, and my blessing is an enoughness and a permission to claim it. Thank you so much. I love saying, be well guided, well protected, and well blessed. And I truly believe that that little prayer creates unbelievable attraction of magic. So I'll also offer that. I would be remiss if I didn't.
That again.
Well, may you be well guided, well protected, and well blessed.
Well blessed. I've heard you say that, a lot of times.
Yes.
And I love it every time. Thank you. It is a spell.
Yes, it is.
So before we end, again, I just want to acknowledge the people who will be connecting to us across space and time.
Yes.
And to acknowledge their part in our conversation. I know that one of the things that you often do is just like have everyone hold their hands up as a symbol of taking what resonates from this conversation. And so I just invite those of you who are watching to receive what is resonating.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, and I just invite you to kind of just tuck it away, hold it close. And then if you would, and this, I've learned this from Lindsay, if you just want to shake out your hand as a sign of letting anything go that wasn't for you. And so that is such I think, a beautiful practice of discernment. And so thank you for joining us and connecting in this way. And Lindsay, thank you. Thank you for that, rich, and it's always like a fast roller coaster with you, a fast and deep roller coaster where I just feel like you're traveling across layers and experiences in a way that I always find really, really fun. Fun and amazing. So thank you for your time and your love and everything that you offer us.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
So I said goodbye to Lindsay, but I just wanted to share one more thing, one tool that she offers that I had found really amazing. She and Sarah Love have, and this is for those of you who really like to dabble, or if you find external tools as guides for your intuitive practice. Sarah Love and LINDSAY PERA created this deck. It's the Mystics Oracle deck. And there are, I don't know how many cards in it, but it can be a deck where you just pull a card every day as a little bit of a message or validation of where you are. And she also created this thing called, the Mystics Almanac. And basically, just like a farmer's almanac, it has some kind of the status or it's like a weather vane for energy. And every day there's a card that is highlighted. Every month there is a set of cards. And I have found this tool to be very resonant. Resonant and supportive and helpful. So I just wanted to add that on to the tail end of this conversation because I forgot to mention it. And I will link below. Okay, thanks again. Bye-bye.